everybody, and happy final WAGS presentation day. Yay. I know everybody's so excited. Our presentation topic today is tracking academic success. So we're going to be talking about different avenues that we feel us as coaches can use to help keep our student athletes on track to building a successful future. And then at the end of the presentation, I'm going to give a little rundown of things that we feel are important factors to take away from our three presentations. So presenting today is Darren Holman, Madison Kroger, Alexis Martinez, myself, Megan Powell, and Jessica Ventosa. Let's see. Woo, okay, it's totally working. Awesome. So our subtopics that we're going to be hitting on this morning are guiding at-risk students. So talking a little bit about how we can keep our students who struggle academically on track to graduation and then meeting their future goals. Time management, how we can help our student athletes manage their time more efficiently. So on here it says postgraduate success. So it's just like resources that are offered to our student athletes to help aid them in whatever they want to do post graduation, whether that be grad school or just going straight into their careers. Accountability, so students learning and understanding the meaning of accountability, and then like I said, takeaways, so things that we're hoping you're able to take from our presentations and use with your teams to help them be academically successful. Once again, if you have any questions, please try and hold them until the end. If you may forget, like we've said in the past, just throw them into the chat and we will address them before the conclusion of our presentation. So today, we're going to be starting out with guiding at-risk students, and Jess, go ahead.
Hi everyone. So we have discussed already kind of guiding at-risk students, so my portion will be a little bit shorter. Simply because I don't want to repeat myself, but if you do have more questions on at-risk students, I can try to help answer those at the end. So first of all, go ahead and make next slide. We're going to talk about the management of at-risk students. So, you know, we've talked to a couple different teams and programs. Each team obviously has their own way of managing at-risk students and how they go about making sure that they're eligible and they're on track to graduate. One common theme that we've seen though in talking to other coaches would be the weekly tracking of the athlete. So whether that's meeting with them on Zoom, back when COVID wasn't a thing, it was meeting with them in person, and then just kind of checking in to see how they were doing in their classes, making sure that their assignments were getting done and that they were on track. So another common theme was requiring some form of study hall, whether it was with our academic team or our assistant coaches. COVID has made it a lot more difficult, I think, to do some of the things that we used to do in managing our student athletes. But I will say having the addition of our academic team with Amanda and Katie has been a tremendous support. I know that a number of our coaches use their services when it comes to study hall, guiding our students, making sure that they're on track. Some teams just leave the at-risk students up to Amanda and Katie. I mean, they check in with them and everything, but it's more or less like, let's let you know, Amanda and Katie use their expertise in this field. So to Amanda and Katie, thank you. We appreciate you guys. You guys have done a tremendous job making sure that our athletes are on track to graduate and eligible. So thank you for that. Go ahead, Meg, next slide. So study hall, you know, we've talked about this already, but many of us require study hall, and a great relief to us is having Amanda and Katie help in that aspect. I know for softball, it was a lot harder in the past to kind of, I guess, manage study hall. Alyssa helped tremendously in that in the past, making sure that we had areas to study and then, you know, helping us track those student athletes. But, you know, during COVID, obviously it's a little bit more difficult, especially since our student athletes have jobs. Their schedules are totally different. But having the ability to go to Amanda and Katie with that is awesome. You know, each team requires study hall on a case-by-case basis. Pre-COVID, it was easier to maintain and require the athletes to do it. For softball, we're requiring study hall, but we're trusting that they're doing it on their own, simply because their schedules are so hectic. I mean, we have some students that have had 3 jobs. So it's extremely difficult to try to say, okay, now you're going to study from, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. when they're exhausted. So we've kind of left it up to them. I know some other coaches have done the same. And that's definitely not the case when we're in person on campus. But because of the situations that we're all in, I think that it's a little bit easier to kind of just maintain, a relationship with them and have those conversations. Okay, what are you studying? When are you studying? Are you doing everything that you need to be doing? And then the other thing that's been super helpful is having more progress reports. So Amanda, thank you for doing those. I think those have helped softball specifically be able to track our athletes a little bit closer. I mean, we used to kind of do it on our own, but it made it more difficult because professors weren't as likely to fill out the forms and turn it in to us. So this way it's a lot, I think, easier for us to be able to kind of manage it and then determine, if we need to up study hall hours, if we need to decrease study hall hours and things like that. Go ahead, Meg, next slide, please. So kind of the ending point for at-risk students, the goals for our at-risk students would be to make sure they're on a good path to graduation. I mean, ultimately, as coaches, we want to make sure that they walk across that stage. So, if that takes a little bit longer, it takes a little bit longer, but the goal is for us 4 years, get them in and get them out. And then secondly, for them to be eligible to compete. Especially if they're a scholarship athlete, we don't want to waste money on being ineligible, in all honesty. So making sure that they're on track to be eligible is huge. We've had student athletes in the way past, when I first got here, that were ineligible for a long period of time. And then through different tracking systems and study hall and the help of Alyssa, we got them eligible, but it seemed as though that sometimes it was a waste of money because, they're not eligible. So making sure that they're eligible is a huge goal. And then that being said, we must be very active in their studies, tracking closely and monitoring habits. I think, habits are a huge deal, making sure that they're studying at the right times, making sure they're not exhausted when they study. And it can be, again, a little bit more difficult now. And then, to make sure that they're still using our resources, whether it's tutoring, Katie, Amanda, Alyssa, and making sure that they have all the knowledge necessary to be successful. So understanding how to get a tutor, if they need help getting a tutor, setting them up in a good environment for studying, things like that. So that's kind of my final talking point on at-risk students. So if you do have any other questions, I can help answer those. But like I said before, Katie, Amanda, and Alyssa have done an exceptional job in helping us track those students, making sure they're on track to graduate and that they're eligible. So again, you guys, thank you for that. Because I can personally say in the past, Alyssa has helped our program tremendously. So without that, Alyssa, I don't know what we would have done. So thank you guys.
All right, so next we will be talking about time management and a couple tips that we can use to help manage our time, especially during COVID when life has gotten a little crazy. All right, so time management is the understanding of how to divide your time between specific activities. And there are 3 particular skills that kind of help separate success from failure for effective time management. So the first one is awareness, understanding how much time you have, the amount of time that needs to be spent on specific tasks, and what's your threshold. And I think that one is what's your threshold is really important right now during COVID. A lot of people have picked up extra responsibilities, and I think we're all just understanding really how long can we go, and everybody's a little different. We all know somebody that can chug a Red Bull and just go forever and ever and ever, and other people need a little bit more time to themselves to settle down and need a little bit more self-care in order to really get good work done. The second one's arrangement. So having an understanding of why and when. So maybe when are your most productive times, or when should my most strenuous work be done? Is that in the mornings or in the evenings? and why is that? And then the final one is adaptation. Are you able to adjust with interruptions, changes in priority? Are we using our time to the best of our abilities, and or should we be spending more or less time in certain areas? And a good way to kind of start in having a good understanding of time management is to kind of take your 24-hour period and block it off. So how much time do I need for sleep? What are some things that I absolutely must do? So, I absolutely must attend class, or I absolutely must attend this meeting. And then what are some things that are kind of negotiable with the time? So maybe I can study during 2 to 3 or 6 to 7, and then trying to block your time. And then what are things that you kind of do for fun that maybe some days you have time for, other days you don't have time for. Next slide, Meg. So we're going to talk about time blocking. And time blocking is a time management method where you divide your day into blocks of time. Each block is dedicated to a specific task, and it really helps you become very structured versus just having a to-do list and saying, okay, I need to do this, this, and this today. And obviously, time blocking is going to work a lot better for some people than it is for others. But if you look at the figure over here, it shows you the time blocking and how it just kind of allows you to be more productive because you're taking similar tasks and putting them together versus, like it says, creating a client proposal, like doing it 6 different times throughout the day. So just trying to get that work done in one chunk. So we're going to talk about 3 different types of time blocking, or I almost call them like cousins of time blocking. And the first one is task batching, which is when you group similar tasks together to avoid context switching. So for our student athletes, that might look like administration work when they wake up in the morning. So that could be like checking their email and their student accounts and Canvas and Blackboard every morning, just to kind of make sure they have an understanding of what's going on for the day. And that's something that might not take a lot of brain power for them to do. So it's great to do right when they wake up in the morning and just say, okay, I do have an understanding of what's going on today. The next one is day theming, and this is where you dedicate a full day of work on a specific task or subject. So this could be a good option for student athletes that have asynchronous classes where they don't have to meet with their professor or get on a Zoom at a certain time. Maybe their lectures are pre-recorded. So maybe they take all of Sunday to plan out what their week's going to look like. On Monday, they focus on getting all their math homework done. On Tuesday, they focus on history. On Wednesday, they focus on physics. And then the last one we're going to look at is time boxing. And that is similar to time blocking, but instead of setting aside certain times, it's more about setting a deadline. So you might be able to work on it a little bit earlier, but instead of saying, I'm going to answer emails from 9 to 11, you're going to say, like, all my emails are going to be done by 9 to 11 o'clock. So it's a little bit different, but this is good for people who think that their tasks might be taking up a little bit more time than they want, or when there's not really like a hard deadline, like let's say there's something 3 weeks away, but you want to go ahead and get it finished. This is a good option for people that need to be driven to help them finish that work on time. So all of these time blocking methods promote deep work and single or like task focus, which is going to increase your productivity because you're spending less time working on tasks that are too long, or maybe you're those tasks that are too short and you're like stretching them out. So it really helps you just get done with things, do it well, and move forward. It's really important though for those that are new to time blocking, or maybe it doesn't work for them quite as well, to schedule in breaks and really try to keep a schedule reoccurring. So maybe every morning I check my email from 8 to 9 just to kind of help them get into that schedule. Next slide, Meg. So the next one we're going to touch on is academic goal setting and its importance to academic success. So as we know, goals help us achieve what we want in our lives. They bring meaning. It gives us power when we set them, and it allows us to develop like a sort of independence when we achieve those goals. So for our student athletes, it's really important to have a personal development plan. So for example, let's say we are recruiting a student athlete and they say, well, I want to go to PA school. And you say, oh, wow, that's great. Like, we have a great biosci program at Stan. And then that's kind of all. There's a lot of hoops to jump through to make sure that you get into PA school. So I think it's really important to not only kind of help them understand what does it take to get into, for example, a PA school, but also giving them like steps, step 1, steps 2, step 3, so that they can see that they're getting closer and closer to their goal or to their dream. So we've talked about SMART goals before, but just a reminder, a SMART goal is something that is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So when I make my SMART goals, I try to use the following method. So for the S, I use 5 W's, the who, what, where, when, why. For measurable, I say how much or how many do I want, or how do I know if I've reached my goal, or how do I know if I'm making progress? And I think that's really important because especially for those long-term goals, it can be hard to keep on track when it's far, far away. So you have to make sure that you have marks where you're hitting progress, or at least you can measure the progress that you've made. Achievable, do I have the resources that I need, or do I have someone who can help me with the resources that I need? And that's great for us coaches because a lot of times when our student athletes come in, they don't know what's available to them through STAN, and it's our job to help, just give them those resources or point them in the right direction so that they can achieve their goals. R for relevant, is this realistic in the time that's given, depending on the resources that I have right now. So obviously you can always gain more resources, but that can take time as well. So is this a relevant goal? Can I achieve it? And then the last one is time bound. So does this have a deadline? Is this deadline flexible? So for some people, for grad school, that can be a very flexible deadline for them. So I think that's important to keep in mind, that they always say you want to have, some type of deadline, but when it's a bigger long-term goal, keep in mind and really encourage that there is a little bit of flexibility with that. SMART goals just really help you push you further, and they kind of give you a sense of direction versus just saying, I want to do this, so that they give you the steps that you need in order to reach those goals. So I gave an example of a short-term goal is having a 3.5 semester GPA, and for grad school, that could be like a long-term goal. And I think it's really important to realize that every student athlete is different. So some may work better with those open-ended goals, but a lot of people can also do well in that environment that is very detailed, where they have the A, B, C, D step. And then the rule of threes, that's one thing that I use for both short and long-term goals. So every 3 months, I try to write down 3 things that I want to accomplish. So usually I do it in January, April, July, and October. So I use 4 quarters of the year. And then at the beginning of the year, I write down, 3 bigger things that I want to achieve. So sometimes those 3 little ones go under the big one, but sometimes there are 3 things that are completely separate that make me feel like I've achieved something or fulfilled, and they make me happy. Go ahead, Meg. Next slide, please. So the last thing I wanted to touch on is finals week, since it's coming up, and I think the biggest thing that we need to take away for this finals term is that we need to plan ahead and accommodate to our schedules. So like we've mentioned before, there's a lot of student athletes that have picked up extra responsibilities, or they need more time to study because of the online format. So I think it's really important to start early versus waiting until maybe reading day to start cramming for your finals exam. Making a schedule and understanding your peak performance time. I think this is really important too, with so many people working. So between your sleep schedule being a little bit off and maybe your work schedule being during your peak performance time, what is your new peak performance time? And when can you really get the most out of studying? Definitely make time for that self-care. I think that's so important right now, especially when we're staring at a screen all day long, and using the resources that you have available. And Stan has made a lot of resources available, especially during this final season. The tutoring center, I know there's SI for certain math and science courses. Professors are more than willing to have office hours during finals, and the Stan Library also made a final support site, which is it's really cool. The first thing they have when you open it is like a motivation wall. So they have some things for like stress management or just kind of to cheer you on. And then they have all the resources from tutoring to some yoga to the career center to the counseling center. They have all of that on one site, and I think that's going to be super helpful, and everybody should definitely point their student athletes in that direction during finals week.
Okay, guys, I'm going to be talking about postgraduate success at STAN. So the next slide. Okay, so the first thing that I looked at for postgraduate success was the Career and Professional Development Center. I actually emailed them and asked them to give me any helpful information that we can pass on to our student athletes. And as you can see, like they have a schedule of events and workshops that they do throughout the semester. And although it's the end of the fall semester, I just thought it would be a good reference for us to look at for next semester. Like this is something that they would send out to student athletes for all of our student athletes to look at, to be aware. And they have very helpful things as far as like creating your resume, interview, like practice interviews, meeting with all the career center people in there so that you can get in contact with them, meeting with different corporations and X, Y, and Z. So I just think it's a very helpful workshops that our student athletes should be aware of, that they probably weren't so much this semester because everything switched online. And I understand like for everyone this fall, it was more of a transitional period. But now that we kind of understand what our school is providing for our student athletes, I think next semester it would be important for us to give them those resources. And for their virtual resources, I actually thought it was pretty cool that they have, even as alumni, so say our seniors graduate and they still don't understand like how to look for a job and they want help doing that, our Career Center helps alumni as well as our student athletes find jobs, find different things that are incorporated with Stanislaus, and they help them get in contact with whoever they need to get in contact with. And I thought that was super cool. And they have two little networking systems, that one that you can practice your interviewing on. So this big interview right here where the 3 virtual resources are, big interview, you can go on there and you can practice your interviewing with people, or kind of like a virtual thing. So you're practicing talking to people, but in the same token, you're just getting prepared. And I think that's super important for our student athletes to practice. And then the second one is for them to, I forgot that they're supposed to, what it helps them. Oh, so if they're undeclared and our student athletes don't understand what they want to do, so say they're freshmen or sophomores and they're still not understanding what they want to do, they can go on there, pick their interests, and it will show them different jobs, different occupations that go with their interests, so that they can help them narrow down what they want to declare as their major. So I thought that was super cool. Okay, next slide. And then as we know, a lot of our student athletes have lost their season and everything. So I think one of the most important things for us to understand as coaches is the graduate school program at Stanislaus. So if we do need to get them started, we do need to get their applications started. I think these are some helpful information we should have. So the application periods for graduate school for fall of 2021 is October 1st through June 30th. Spring of 2021, August 1st through October 30th. This is the application fee of $70, and it is a 2-step program. So they first have to apply to the university as a graduate student. So they'll go to Cal State apply to the Stanislaus itself, and then they have to apply to the program, the specific program. And each program has its own can't think of the word, its own program. So they have to go through its own interview process. And the requirements for the baseline requirements for all of the programs is 2.5 GPA in the last 60 units of coursework, but it may vary by the program depending on which program your student athlete wants to go to. And so they obviously have to have their bachelor's degree in order to get their master's or whatever they're going to go back to school for. And here's the contact information if you need it. And then next slide. And then I just put some tips for our student athletes post-grad. If they are not returning as student athletes, I think it's important for them to keep in mind the current circumstances. I think it's important for them to keep in mind that internships, interviews, jobs are all going to look completely different, as they're not going to be able to be in person as much as they would like. They're not going to be able to sell themselves as much as they would like in person. As student athletes, I think they're so used to going and doing things physically and actively. This is completely different. And everybody, it's not just them going through it, it's everybody. Everybody is, every corporation, every occupation, everything is changing. And so during this change, I just think they should keep in mind, like, these are not normal circumstances, and that's okay. That's okay. And we all are playing by ear. We're all learning as we're going. And to help with that, I think it's important for our student athletes to utilize the alumni resources that we have, such as the Career Center, such as the professors that they've made contacts with. It's okay. I think it's important for us to let them know it's okay to contact your professors even after you graduate. They're more than willing to help you as long as you reach out. That's what they're there for. And then teammates. Teammates is a huge, I think, resource as far as connecting with them even after you graduate. Because I know in the past there's some girls that have graduated, say for child development, and we had a student athlete that had already graduated, had a job. They were looking for more student athletes because they liked the way that they worked. They liked their working environment. They liked that they could work with students. They liked that they could work with children. They liked all these things. So as long as they keep in contact with those alumni that have already been through our program and are successful and can help other student athletes that are going to kind of follow in the footsteps, I think that would be super helpful. And then another thing, just to tailor their resume, just according to the job that they're going to apply for. I think like the workshops that we have are amazing and great, but as long as we're utilizing them, I think that's the most important thing. If we don't utilize them, we're not fully taking advantage of all the resources that we have. And then another thing is that as student athletes, we know how to fail. They know how to fail, and they know that failure helps you get to where you're going. But in the same token, as you go into the job environment and you're like applying for these jobs and you want these jobs because as a student athlete, you're like, I got to do this, and you're on this pace that you're ready to go, and then you get told no. And I know for me personally, I just graduated as well a couple years ago. When I got my first no, I didn't know how to take it, So I think us allowing our student athletes to know that a no is okay and the opportunities that you want are going to come your way. It just takes a little patience. And like I said, we have to go back to the current circumstances that we're in. It's not the same. It's not the same as far as after you graduate, you're able to go into these places and you're going to apply. Like, it's a completely different process. And getting a no is okay because those yeses that they're going to get are going to be so much better. And then the last and final thing I would like for our student athletes to know after they graduate is to take the time to be proud of themselves. Because as student athletes, we get in this, we get in this motion of I have to do this and I have to do this, and they love structure. Our student athletes love structure, so they keep going. And I think one thing we need to remind them of is we always say, like, let them take a break, like let them understand what they're going through and that they can be proud of themselves, especially after graduation. Like, that's a huge accomplishment. And for some student athletes, they're the first ones in their families. They're the first ones that have ever been through these experiences. And it's great to take a time and to just be like, I did it. And that's great. And to soak it in, be proud of themselves, and just know, like, we as coaches, as a program, as the school, are all so proud of them for doing what they've done, especially during this time. So those are the things I have for postgraduate.
Hello. Accountability. Once again, we're going to talk about accountability. And I feel that the most important thing that we can touch on with accountability, as well as everything that we've been going through in this presentation, as well as the past presentations, as well as my presentations in the past, is that how do we get students to buy into what we're trying to do? Next slide. So the relevance piece of accountability, I think, is huge. And I do think it applies to not only our presentation, but I think it applies to every one of us that presented, every one of us that is a leader in some aspect of the sport or in education. We're all trying to create relevance so our student athletes will support what we're trying to, where we're trying to lead them. So I think that if we look at it as parents and as coaches, we're all teachers in some aspect. And so with parenting, with being a teacher and as well as being a coach, we set these standards, we set these rules, we set up training. And then the other side of it is accountability. And in the teaching world, accountability for a lot of us is based on grades, right? It's a measure of how they're doing. And then also that report card goes to somebody that's going to hold these people accountable. And that's another piece of the accountability. But with us dealing with adults, we don't have a report card to send to parents and then expect the parents to hold these students accountable. So with us, the buy-in from our student athletes is same with adults. If you're managing adults, you have to get their buy-in. And everybody says relevance is a huge piece, and that's true. And I'm totally agreeing with that. But I think what we need to focus on is that relevance is not something that you can state. I mean, people do, and I think that's the big mistake. I think people say you need to get good grades in math because you want to get a good job. And I feel that, that's a poor example of stating relevance. I think what those of us that are successful in leadership roles is that we somehow, whether some of us do it intentionally or non-intentionally, is the relevance piece cannot be stated. It needs to be created. So we have to create the relevance through something that might not be so obvious, because we're dealing with young adults that sometimes don't view life through the same lens as we do. Or it's a time issue. Sometimes you don't see the relevance in something because your position on your life timeline is not there yet to see relevance. A lot of times you don't see the relevance in your retirement account until you're 53, and then you're panicked because maybe you didn't see how important it was when you were 20. So sometimes you have to somehow, as good leaders, as good coaches, as good teachers, is to create this. And sometimes it's really hard to create this. So one example, you can go to the next slide. One example that I want to use is that the relevance piece, I think if we put it into a situation or example of if you were trying to teach someone how to work on a car, the normal classic teaching style is to take, I've seen this, a bunch of tools, and you go through lessons on this is a screwdriver, and this is a wrench, this is a hammer, and you learn all the tools. And so what is the relevance with learning a tool? Well, because a tool in itself means nothing. And I think that what we're doing in education as well as sometimes in our coaching is we're putting the cart before the horse. And I think sometimes we do this with tracking performance or tracking athletic performance or any sort of tracking performance of athletics, academics, job performance. It's all the same. So what we really should be doing, and I'm going to use the same car example, is you start working on the car. And then they see something. I mean, how are you going to get a bolt undone without a wrench? And so automatically, if you really want them to learn about a screwdriver or a tool, you start working on something that they need it. They have to have it. And they can see that I cannot take a bolt out with a screwdriver. I have to have a wrench. And why do you have to have a wrench? And why do the sizes matter? Well, all bolts are not the same size. Well, you could speak to that cart before the horse, and it makes no sense to them. They don't have a clue. They don't care. They're on their phone. They're picking their nose. They have no idea what they're doing. But if you get them involved and then you show them the relevance that they have to have it, they're going to learn how to use whatever tool it is, whether it's a power tool, whether it's a screwdriver. So I think we have to backtrack, reevaluate how we do things, and start planning and creating the relevance piece. So I think in some of my prior amazing presentations, I was speaking about relevance. And I think that what I need to really bring up and reevaluate or restate is that sometimes just saying and explaining the relevance is just not enough. And especially I think with young adults, looking at their timeline in life and where they are, and sometimes they're not looking as far ahead as we are or we should, is we have to create that. And one of the examples that I do to create relevance in what I'm trying to do is I'm a distance coach. Distance running is what I do. So your aerobic capacity, your ability to perform difficult tasks for long periods of time is really important. And one of the struggles with distance running is a lot of student athletes want to be really fast, and which is what I want, but they want to be able to run a 200 really fast. And they feel that a bunch of long distance running is not going to help them run really fast. And in their world, if you're not fast, you won't win races. So, and this is normally I break through this wall that they have, because most of their life, everybody's look how fast they are, and the end of a race is how people sprint is called a kick. And so everybody says the only way to win a race, obviously, is to have a good kick. So you need a lot of speed. Well, it doesn't matter how fast you are if you can't run that fast at the very end of, say, a 10K race. So Usain Bolt, I think we all can agree was pretty fast. But if you had him run a marathon and then sprint the last 200 meters, he's probably not as fast as he would be when he was fresh. So a normal distance runner after 26 miles could outsprint Usain Bolt. And it's not because Usain Bolt isn't the fastest man in the world. He's not the fastest man in the world sprinting after he ran 26 miles. So what we do is I create time trials. We create workouts to where I get them very, very tired, and then we sprint, and then we can see that they're really lacking in certain situations. So sometimes we can create an event that can show a weakness of somebody that we're leading, and not in a way that's going to, like, you're terrible at this, you need to quit. So don't take that wrong. We show them what they need to work on to create that relevance, to help us and restate the reason why we're doing a certain task. So long story short, when we're talking about tracking and performance, we need to think of ways that we can show them and create situations that tracking performance and any sort of idea that we're presenting them is very important. Next slide. So how we do that is, obviously we can go into the timeline, graduation, as well as athletic timelines. It is super important that we speak to them in terms of, we have two timelines that we're working with student athletes. We have their graduation timeline and we have their academic timeline. And what we need to do is make sure that they're working together. So hopefully that they're at least their undergraduate timeline, because that's a lot of times where scholarships and athletic aid or just grants and FAFSA comes into account, is that we need to keep them on track. So we can explain this, but we also can look to other examples of real world examples of how, if you don't align those two, you could get yourself in a situation where it doesn't work out for your benefit, whether you have years of school left, that your academic eligibility has finished, but you still have 2 years of school left that you may or may not be able to get through. Or, for example, we talked about recently where people are trying to extend their academic timeline to meet their athletic timeline due to the situation we're in. Next slide, please. So one thing that works really good with motivation is money. And money talks, and money is a timeless example of a motivator. And no matter what generation you're in, most of the time, everything we do with school, for the most part, is based upon the idea that somehow, if we accomplish these things, we're going to make more money. And with this said, we can use this in the same aspect with trying to keep them on their academic timeline as well. So if they do not stay on their academic timeline, which means we're trying to hold them accountable. The whole presentation ahead of me was all these great reasons and great ways to hold them accountable. But we need to somehow get the student athletes to see the relevance, because like I said, they're in a completely different timeline. It's like trying to convince a 20-year-old that they need to start saving for retirement. That's difficult. So what we need to do is think of ways that, listen, if you don't stay on track, you could be in school for an extra 2 years. Your financial aid will not work your last 2 years, and you're going to have to pay this much money. So sometimes that will work. And I think the key is, to go back to my point earlier, is how do we create this relevance? Because we can talk to them about it. We can say, hey, you better start saving. You better get on track, or you're going to be kicked out of school. You're going to have to spend a bunch of money. How do we create the relevance? And sometimes that's super difficult. I do not have all the answers of how to create all the relevance. I'll do a little bit better to create relevance within my sport. But we need, as coaches, I think, to still collaborate on how to create true relevance, to really get kids to understand, because without the buy-in of our student athletes, it's really, really hard to hold them accountable. We need them to give us their 50% as we give ours. We can create the programs. Stan State has created the programs. We created all these avenues. But I think all of us, especially some of our administrators and some of our academic advisors, how do we get the students to use the tools we give them? How do we convince them that it's important? How do we show them that they need this now, not later? And I think that all of us possibly can work together on trying to think of ways to create the relevance, sometimes out of the blue, because sometimes it's hard for us to create relevance. Sometimes it's hard for us to explain to our children that algebra is important. It's hard, and we need to somehow create that for our student athletes. So next slide. So within our discussions and our takeaways, before I send this off, is that I hope all of us can continue the conversation of trying to explain and create ideas to keep our student athletes relevant to all the tasks and performance issues and performance tracking that we're trying to do. And if we do that, I think we all can be very successful. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Darren. Okay, so I said at the beginning of the presentation this was going to be brief, and I promise it will be, because every single one of our presentations has gone over. So I'm going to make sure we stay under time today. So takeaways. We feel like we've given a ton of great resources, tips, and strategies to use with your teams to help them be academically successful. And I'm just going to do a brief, I promise, run through of the things that we feel are going to be like real big game changers for your teams moving forward. So I'm going to start with today. Jess said it really well. We have hit on at-risk students a million times, but guiding our at-risk students, so staying in touch with them through weekly meetings, grade report forms, and then weekly grade check-ins, and then making sure that they have goals set academically for themselves. Time management, I think that Madison did a good job of like laying out how we can be efficient with our time, or how our students can be efficient with their time through awareness, arrangement, adaptation, time blocking, and goal setting. And then she hit on finals week study tips. We keep saying resources, resources, resources. We have a ton of resources on campus. Please encourage our students to go use them, especially during finals week if they're feeling unsure about anything. take advantage of all the resources that are available. Postgraduate success. I loved what Tex had done, throwing up that little, it was like, it almost looked like a flyer on her slide of all the events that are held through the Career and Professional Development Center. She hit on it already, but they have so many great like events or like skill, like building, resume building, networking. I didn't even know that they could do an interview like with somebody, like a mock trial interview. I think that that's great for like building their confidence in moving forward with their future goals. If we can just do our part as coaches and remind our student athletes about these events, I think that that would be awesome. Like, again, Darren saying accountability and relevance, like we have to hold ourselves accountable and make sure that they understand the relevance of these events. Graduate school, so nobody likes filling out applications. Nobody. I know I dreaded it when I had to do it for college. It was probably like the worst experience ever. They're just so long and drawn out. But the process for graduate school at Stan, all in all, is pretty simple. So you just have to remember the application periods for both fall and spring. Again, this is really important, seeing as we may need to be getting some of our student athletes into graduate school. And then the application fee, which is $70, apply to the university as a graduate student, not just a regular student, because that would be a big mistake, and then you'd have to go back and do it again, and then apply to your desired program. And like she said, pending the program you're applying for, coursework units and the GPA may vary, but the degree, your bachelor's degree, is a must. So they need to understand that they can't apply for graduate school unless they have their bachelor's degree. I would think that they would all know that, but just in case they don't, maybe we should tell them again. Going back to our first presentation, so seeing as we may be virtual again in the spring, we thought it was great to just kind of refresh your memories about online learning and some of the things like tools that you can use or helpful resources, again, that we can remind our student athletes of. So student athlete and professor communication. So encourage them to introduce themselves again this spring via Zoom, email, or video. Make sure our student athletes remain proactive throughout the semester with their professors. I think that sometimes they tend to wait a little too long because they think that they can get it, they think that they can understand, they think they can push through and get that B or that C or whatever it may be. But then it's a little too late and they're like, oh gosh, I need to email my professor. And it's like, okay, well, it's December 4th, so good luck. I had a girl who came to me and said that she should have started emailing her professor and doing weekly meetings at the beginning of the semester. She's doing them now, which is great, and her grade is going up, but again, she feels like it was just a little too late. Student athlete and coach communication. So I know that for fall sports, we tend to give our teams like a little bit of a break from us come December and January. Even if our weekly check-ins aren't, what's the word I'm looking for? Like if we don't have to document them, I guess. I think that maybe bi-weekly check-ins over the holidays is a good idea, just because with the news that's been delivered about, CCA and no competition, I think that they need to hear our voices and know that we care and we're concerned, and we want to make sure that moving forward, whatever they decide to do, like we have their backs and like we're here for them kind of thing. So whether that's to stay and play or go to graduate school or, maybe look at different avenues for themselves moving forward. They need to hear that, like, yeah, like that's fine. You're okay with that. And like, maybe just checking in and making sure mentally that they're doing well. Navigation. So on our first presentation, Tex put up a ton of little intro videos for the different platforms that are being used for virtual learning, which I think it was Canvas, Moodle, Google Classroom, and Blackboard. I really advise you guys, if you haven't yet, go ahead and look at those little intro videos. They do not take longer than 5 minutes, and seeing as we may be virtual again, it's probably a good idea now to do that. And then knowing what quick links and resources are available for our students. So literary resources, library, software, bookstore, they're all on that presentation. If you can't remember what they are, please go back and visit it so that we're giving our student athletes the correct information of where to go if they need something. Tips. So find a way each student athlete likes to track their assignments. The 3 that Jess gave, I think, were planner, whiteboard, and binders for each class. These are just the 3 that, you know, we came up with and we thought were a good idea. If something else works for your student athlete, encourage that. Don't tell them, no, you have to use these 3. Like, everybody's different. Everybody has their own way of like processing and feeling organized, and as long as they are getting the job done, I think that encouragement through whatever avenue they find is the best way to track those assignments is great. And then have a designated study space. If you have somewhere you can go, like Jess has said, your focus is like increases. That's where I go to do my classwork. That's where I go to focus on whatever is being taught that day. And then strategies, self-care. I know we hit on it, or Tex hit on it today, but we felt it's extremely important to remind our student athletes to take a break and do something that they enjoy. Zoom fatigue is real, and sitting in front of a computer screen all day can seriously like drain your brain. So you need to make sure that like your brain is still getting like stimulated somehow by doing something that you enjoy, like coloring, hiking, yoga, whatever it may be, other than just doing labs and homework and projects all day. Academic resources, so study hall. Jess praised Amanda, Katie, and then also Sarah on the virtual study hall that they did this semester. And I don't know if they're planning on allowing more than just at-risk students in next semester, but if they are, please send your students to do study hall virtually, because what they've done is quite amazing. I mean, the patience and the organization and like the planning that has gone into virtual study hall like blew my mind when I talked to Amanda about it. So please send your students there. And again, at the end of the day, it's you send them there to hold themselves accountable to do the right thing. We cannot make sure, or Amanda cannot make sure that even though they say they're studying, they're, you know, are doing their paper for their English class, that they're actually doing it, even though that they may have their camera on. She can't be like, all right, let me see your paper, you know, because then that's being a little bit too overbearing. You have to give them that sense of accountability as well. And I think that they've done a great job with that through virtual study hall. The importance of setting the academic standard, letting them know what is expected of them. Sorry, excuse me, guys. I'm talking really fast, I know. But sorry, setting the academic standard, accountability, so making them feel like they own their study hall hours or like their schedule, and then it minimizes distractions. Again, that designated study workspace is there for them to go to and know that they have to get things done. And then intentional, it helps them realize that they have to be intentional with what they're doing at that moment. And then academic meetings. How do we determine who should have academic meetings? So grade point average, major, and study habits. So these are the 3 main points that Jess talked about on our last presentation. And then I know for volleyball, we also require it for any incoming freshmen and transfers. Okay, academic resources, again, continued. Increasing productivity. Madison, she did that cool little activity with us at our last presentation where we were trying to like multitask and like count and do letters all at the same time. She made it very clear that even though people think that they can multitask, they really can't. So we need to make sure our student athletes are setting aside like specific study break ratios. So the 5 to 10 that she had mentioned, I thought was great. And then she gave us a list of like, I think it was like browser blockers kind of that like keep away like Facebook, Instagram, like Twitter, all those things while you're like studying for whatever the allotted time that you put on there for. And then apps to aid in productivity, the off time app, the Forest app, which she gave us a little rundown of where you can like create your own forest, which I thought was cool. And then Pockets Point app. Tutoring services. So we have the tutoring center, writing center, essay sessions, and then one thing that we thought was really exciting was team tutors, and we're really hoping that we can take advantage of this through our tutoring center, because if we can have tutors for our specific teams to like come in and focus like just on our team, that would be great, as opposed to like them going in and like sitting in front of their tutor, and then they have like a group of other people who are there, even though they're in the same class. Having like one person come in and actually sit down with your team and say, hey, I'm here to help you guys, I think means a little bit more to them than them just going into the tutoring center and sitting at a table in front of their tutor. All right, so obviously I saved accountability for last because it's so great, and Darren did such a wonderful job with it. The two topics that I wanted to hit on, because he already hit on the relevance piece today, we're helping our student athletes understand the concept of accountability. So really explaining to them what accountability is. So creating a culture of trust and responsibility, set high standards and clear expectations for them, give students ownership of their learning process, help students learn to self-assess their work, and then connect the classroom to home. Those are all great standards to set, or like concepts of accountability to keep in mind moving forward with our teams. And then holding ourselves as coaches accountable and our student athletes. So he talked about it really well on our last presentation. So the mention, this is where like you have, I think you ask questions. This is where you ask questions. So do you have everything that you need, kind of thing. And then the invitation was we stay positive and helpful while making sure the point is direct. And then we ask more than we direct, so not to be too aggressive. We're still kind of like working with them, kind of thing. And then the conversation was we acknowledge that there's a problem. So clearly, if we're getting to this point, there is a problem because they still aren't getting done what was being asked of them. And then we look for a solution together, as opposed to like just putting it on them, like figure it out, get it done. Like we work together with them. And then the boundary is where we explain the consequences and document and like have it signed. So like both parties sign it. So like we're acknowledging it together. Again, this is all together. So we're being accountable while holding them accountable. And then the limit is there needs to be consequences, as well as showing that this is the last time that it will be addressed. So this is it. This is the final straw. And I thought all of those 5 steps were great. I know that I'm definitely going to use them with the volleyball team, because, you know, you want to hold yourself accountable while you hold them accountable, but you also don't want to be overbearing. And I think that this is a great way to do it. So it's like, I'm here, I'm working with you. I'm not telling you, you have to do it by yourself. I'm going to make sure that we're doing it together. And if we have to get to the limit where like you're not doing it, then these are the consequences. And we've documented them and signed them, and that's what it's going to be. So the awareness that you have of your relationship with your specific student athletes will help you navigate these different approaches of accountability. All right, so final thoughts. I think we need to be in tune and communicating consistently with our student athletes so we can help identify their needs, wants, and concerns in order to best serve them. So by having a better understanding of the resources offered through our campus and department, we can continue to help our athletes thrive academically despite being in such an uncertain time. All right, I think I did it. Nailed it, 11:30. All right, woo, finally. Okay, so I think we're going to questions now. And again, I know I talked really fast, but the best part about that is that it's going to be put up on our athletic website. So.
First of all, that was a great job. Not only really fast talking, but really the content was awesome. I really appreciated it. One thought I had about the presentation, I wanted to get what you guys think about this, and maybe Jessica, what she thinks. There's been a lot of stuff now about trying to reduce labels like at risk, right?
I knew you were going to bring this up, Gabe. I knew you were.
So I was just kind of thinking like what you guys thought about that, and if that was something that you'd come across in your research.
So so yes, I understand the issue with labeling. I get that. we were trying to come up with a better way to describe students who are falling behind academically. And so at risk is just something that I feel like we have used as a department, not just, our team. So through the Academic Resource Center, we were told, send your at-risk students to us. We didn't come up with a better term as of right now. I think that as a department, maybe we should. So that way, we don't say, yeah, you're going to the tutoring center because you're an at-risk student, maybe just saying like, yeah, we're going to send you to the tutoring center or to the Academic Resource Center because they can better help you and guide you to having academic success. But I totally get where you're coming from. And I do think that maybe taking away the at-risk label is a good idea.
Thanks. I was in no way saying that you guys invented the term or were at fault for the term or anything. It's just something that
So
I was in a...
I can weigh in on this for a second. I feel that, number one, I think I was an at-risk student my whole life. But the way things have changed in California is, we used to have other terms that were not appropriate. Now we have, and they came to at risk, which they thought was new, appropriate term. And now in California, they have come up with a new term, and it's at promise is what they're using now, instead of it's supposed to replace the at risk term. I think that the only reason we used at risk in our presentation was due to the fact that that's what Stan State is currently using. But there's an article in Inside Education Ed that I can send you a link, Gabe. It talks about the change. It actually came into effect November 5th, 2019, regarding the official change of taking away at risk and putting in the at promise students. And I'll send that link to anybody that wants it. But anyway, good point, Gabe. And so in the future, I think you're going to hear that term and be adopted by Stan State as well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Darren. I haven't heard the at promise term at all. And I do know at risk is nationwide, I guess. It's probably been long overdue for a change, but a common terminology in athletics for, I couldn't tell you, in the NCAA. So it's been a long time. I'm certainly open for suggestions. It doesn't, we certainly don't want it as derogatory, but as long as people know what we're talking about or what Stan State is talking about, I would say, then that's the most important thing. So yeah, good observation. Gabe stole my question because I was going to ask a similar question based upon the conversation he and I had last time about that. So great job.
Yeah, one of the things I heard was that maybe labels just aren't needed at all. Like if they're not labels that explain the situation or are helpful. So for example, if the concept is everyone that's meeting extra with Amanda, instead of saying at risk, is the concept is they're meeting with her because they all have below a 2.5, grade point average. Then the group is, related to their grade point average, not a arbitrary term like at risk, for them. So I had heard the at promise one, like Darren brought up, and then I had seen a couple articles that just talked about why not just eliminate, any labels, to begin with, and just, if somebody is getting extra help, why are they getting extra help? They're getting extra help because they are struggling in this or that class. Then that's just why they're getting, extra help. We're not grouping them and putting labels on them that can carry, longer term, stigmas, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gabe.
Yeah, men's soccer Cam posted a note about that too, that he's already changed that in his program. So yeah, I think that's great. It's nice to see some of the teams that are proactive in doing that as well too. So this had come up maybe a month ago or so on an email thread in the NCAA, but about what that group could be labeled. The hard part is the suggestions that came out, as you say, were more labeling, like the sub 3.0 group and all that. It was terrible. Some of the ideas in there were, I think, far worse, you know, so there wasn't anything decisive. So I'm certainly okay with something that our group wants to come up with, and then trying, obviously, to get our campus to change the terminology as well, too. So I think that'd be an important part of it. Yeah, awesome. Good question. What other questions or comments do we have? Thanks for sharing, Darren. Okay. The final thing I would say is for me, it's very fun to hear some of the successes that we're having, particularly in academics, and to hear our coaches realize the hard work and time that Amanda and Katie and Alyssa and just some of those people are putting in for the success of the student athletes. I really enjoy that. It makes me think that, the plan we had in place to improve our overall operation is working, and that we have the right people in those places too. So that's always the goal: get better every day, get better as a department. And there were several times throughout this presentation that Amanda and the program and the thoughtfulness and the caring and the attention to detail was recognized. And I certainly support that as well too. And I think, Alyssa's leadership too kind of laid the foundation. Amanda and Katie kind of working together. Those roles are very similar the way we've packaged them with cross training. They work very hard to support our student athletes. And I'm glad to see our coaches are realizing that. Not that they weren't before. That's a poor choice of words. I'm glad to see that they're getting proper acknowledgement, because it is at times a thankless job. And the goal for administrators, in my opinion, is to make the job easier for our coaches and our student athletes, to provide resources, provide all the resources to help our students. So I believe we have a pretty good team over there, and I wanted to also acknowledge them for their work, because that program that she has, the study hall, is something that I think is very beneficial and will pay off in the long run for all of us. But well done on that part as well, and good job on the presentation. I think it's always a relevant topic. Any other questions, comments? So we will wrap it for the WAGS presentation, and I'm certain that we're going to take a little break from WAGS, and I know that may be the biggest round of applause for everyone involved in this. I know it's been a long semester, but I think it's really helped. It's helped in many, many ways, and I think it's helped all of you. So I appreciate it. We'll take a little break, and we'll conclude our fall semester WAGS presentation series. Thank you all. I appreciate it. Have a good weekend coming up. If you need me, call me, email me. I'm here for you. Appreciate it. Thank you.